Marcus Chen had never been good at keeping his thoughts to himself. His mother had always said his mouth worked faster than his brain. She had meant it as a joke, but standing in the greeting bay of the diplomatic vessel Terran Resolve, Marcus was about to prove her right in the worst possible way. The ship hummed with nervous energy. Everywhere Marcus looked, he saw officers adjusting their uniforms and diplomats checking their data pads one last time. This was humanity's first formal meeting with the Valorian Empire. After 50 years of careful communication across the stars, the two species were finally going to talk face to face. The pressure was enormous. One wrong word could destroy everything. Marcus was not supposed to be important today. He was a junior diplomatic attaché, which was a fancy way of saying he carried bags and fetched coffee for people who actually mattered. His job was simple. Stand at the back. Look professional. Saying nothing. His friend Yuki Tanaka stood beside him. She was also junior staff, also supposed to be invisible. She nudged him with her elbow and whispered, "Stop fidgeting. You look like you need to use the bathroom." "I'm not fidgeting," Marcus lied. He was absolutely fidgeting. The airlock doors began to open with a soft hiss. The sound made everyone in the room stand straighter. Marcus felt his heart beat faster. He had seen pictures of Valorians, of course. Everyone had. But pictures did not prepare him for what walked through that door. The first Valorians to enter were guards. They were tall, nearly 7 feet, with skin that shifted between shades of deep blue and purple. Their faces were sharp and angular, beautiful in a way that felt almost mathematical. They moved without sound, their 4 eyes scanning the room with cold precision. Then came the attendants, dressed in flowing robes that seemed to be made of liquid silver. They walked in perfect formation, each step identical to the last dot, and then she entered. Princess Calithvera was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. She stood taller than her guards, her skin a soft lavender that seemed to glow under the ship's lights. Her hair was silver, but it moved on its own, flowing around her shoulders like it was alive. She had 4 eyes like all Valorians, but hers were different. They held depths that Marcus could not explain. Looking at her was like looking at the night sky and realizing for the first time how small you really were. She was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. Marcus forgot how to breathe. He forgot where he was. He forgot that he was supposed to be invisible and silent and professional. His mouth opened before his brain could stop it. He leaned toward Yuki and whispered, "I want to marry her." The words were soft, barely louder than a breath. No human more than a foot away could have heard them. But Marcus did not know something very important about Valorians. Their hearing was not like human hearing. They could hear a heartbeat from across a room. They could hear blood moving through veins. They could hear the tiny sounds that muscles made when they tensed. They could hear a whisper as clearly as a shout. Every Valorian in the room turned to look at Marcus at the exact same moment. Their 4 eyes locked onto him with perfect synchronization. The guards' hands moved toward their weapons. The attendants stopped mid-step, frozen in shock. Princess Calithvera stared directly at him. All 4 of her eyes focused on his face with an intensity that made Marcus want to sink through the floor and disappear forever. The room went completely silent. Marcus could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. He could feel every drop of sweat forming on his forehead. Beside him, Yuki had stopped breathing entirely. "Oh no," Marcus whispered. The Valorians heard the two. Ambassador Harrison, the head of the human delegation, stepped forward with a smile that looked painful. "Your Highness, please forgive any confusion. I'm sure there has been some kind of misunderstanding." The princess raised one elegant hand, and the ambassador stopped talking immediately. She had not looked away from Marcus. Her expression was impossible to read. Valorians did not show emotion on their faces. They considered feelings to be primitive, something that lesser species had not evolved beyond. They communicated through precise chemical signals and sounds too, low for humans to hear, but something was different about how she looked at Marcus. Her head tilted slightly to one side. One of her attendants made a small sound of surprise, quickly silenced. "That one," the princess said. Her voice was like music, but music played on instruments that had never existed on Earth. The human who spoke. "What is his name?" Ambassador Harrison looked like he might faint. "Your Highness, he is merely a junior attach. He is not important to these proceedings. I assure you, whatever he said was not meant to cause offense. I did not ask if he was important. I asked for his name." Marcus felt Yuki's hand grip his arm so tightly it hurt. His career was over. Humanity's first alliance was ruined. He had destroyed everything because he could not keep his stupid mouth shut. "His name is Marcus Chen, Your Highness," someone said. Marcus realized with horror that the voice was his own. The princess's eyes narrowed slightly. Among her people, this was a significant expression. Her attendants exchanged glances, but carried entire conversations in their chemical signals. "Marcus Chen," she repeated. The way she said his name made it sound like something precious and strange. "You will be assigned to my personal diplomatic detail for the duration of these negotiations." The room erupted into chaos. Ambassador Harrison began speaking very quickly about protocols and proper procedures. The Valorian guards shifted their positions. Yuki's grip on Marcus's arm tightened until he lost feeling in his fingers. The princess ignored all of it. She continued to stare at Marcus with those four impossible eyes. "I have studied humans for many years," she said, and her voice cut through the noise like a blade through silk. Everyone fell silent again. "Your species is strange to us. You speak your inner thoughts aloud. You make sounds that serve no purpose. You let chemical reactions control your behavior." She took one step toward Marcus, then another. Her guards moved with her, their hands still near their weapons. In 10,000 years of Valorian history, no one has ever said what you just said. Not to a member of the royal family. Not to anyone. She stopped directly in front of him. This close, Marcus could see that her eyes contained actual stars, tiny points of light that swirled in their depths. "I wish to understand why." Marcus opened his mouth. Nothing came out. For once in his life, he had no words. The princess made a sound that might have been amusement. "Perhaps you have finally learned silence. How interesting that it took meeting me to teach you." She turned and walked away, her attendants flowing around her like water around a stone. At the door, she paused and looked back. "I will expect you at the first formal dinner, Marcus Chen. Do try to keep your thoughts inside your head until then." Her eyes met his one more time. "Or do not. I find myself curious which you will choose." Then she was gone, and Marcus was left standing in a room full of humans who looked at him like he had just started a war. Yuk. I finally released his arm. "What?" she said slowly. "Did you just do?" Marcus had no answer. He had come here to carry bags and fetch coffee. Now he was assigned to an alien princess who had heard him say he wanted to marry her. His mother had been right. His mouth really did work faster than his brain. And somehow, impossibly, that might not be entirely a bad thing. 2 weeks had passed since Marcus destroyed his career with 6 words. At least, that was how he saw it. The truth was stranger and more complicated than simple destruction. The diplomatic mission had moved from the Terran Resolve to Valoria Prime, the throne world of the Valorian Empire. Marcus had expected to be sent home in disgrace. Instead, he found himself living in a palace made of crystal and light. Assigned to attend Princess Kalithvera whenever she requested his presence. She requested his presence often. The palace was nothing like anything on Earth. The walls were grown. Not built, from a material that sang softly when the wind passed through it. The floors were warm beneath his feet, and the ceiling stretched so high that clouds sometimes formed inside the larger rooms. Everything was beautiful. Everything was cold, that the Valorians did not touch each other. They did not laugh or cry or raise their voices. They communicated in chemicals and sounds that humans could not perceive, keeping their words hidden from foreign ears. They looked at Marcus like scientists studying a particularly unusual insect. The princess was different. She did not look at him like he was an insect. She looked at him like he was a puzzle she was determined to solve. "Why do you do that?" she asked him one morning. They were walking through a garden of crystal flowers that chimed in the breeze. Her attendants followed at a distance, watching everything. "Do what, Your Highness?" "Your face changed color when I entered the room. Your heart rate increased by 23%. Your pupils expanded." She tilted her head in that way she did when something confused her. "You are having a physical response to my presence." "Why?" Marcus felt his face grow even hotter. "It's called blushing, Your Highness. It happens when humans feel embarrassed, or—" He stopped himself before saying anything else stupid. "Or what?" "Or when they're near someone they find attractive." The princess was silent for a long moment. Her 4 eyes studied his face like she was reading a book written in a language she was only beginning to learn. "Attractive," she repeated. "This is a human concept for selecting mates, yes, based on physical appearance and emotional response, rather than genetic compatibility. Analysis, that's one way to put it. It is inefficient, illogical. Your species chooses partners based on chemical reactions in your brains, rather than careful analysis of beneficial traits." She paused. "And yet your population grows faster than any other species in the known galaxy. You have spread to more worlds in 3 centuries than we have in 12 millennia. Marcus did not know what to say to that. He had never thought of human love as a competitive advantage before. The princess stopped walking and turned to face him fully. "I have a question, Marcus Chen. Answer it honestly." "I'll try, Your Highness. When you said you wanted to marry me, what did you feel? Not what you thought. What you felt." The question hit Marcus like a punch to the chest. He had spent 2 weeks trying not to think about that moment. Now she was asking him to relive it. "I felt overwhelmed," he said slowly. "Like everything else in the room disappeared. Like the only thing that existed was you. My heart beat faster. My thoughts stopped making sense. I felt like I was falling, but falling towards something wonderful instead of something dangerous." The princess's attendants exchanged alarmed chemical signals. What Marcus was describing was considered a serious malfunction among Valorians. A sign of genetic defect, but the princess did not look alarmed. She looked fascinated. "We removed this from ourselves," she said quietly. 3,000 years ago. We decided that emotion was a weakness, so we engineered it out of our species. We thought we were becoming stronger." Her voice dropped even lower. "I am beginning to wonder if we were wrong." Before Marcus could respond, the world exploded. The blast came from somewhere to their left. Crystal shattered. The ground shook. Marcus heard screaming, and then realized some of it was coming from his own throat. Figures in dark armor emerged from the smoke. Valorian extremists, his panicked mind recognized. There had been intelligence reports about groups who opposed any alliance with humanity. They considered humans to be animals, unworthy of contact with the superior Valorian species. They had come to kill the princess, who dared to speak with one dot. Everything happened very fast. The guards moved to intercept the attackers. Energy weapons fired, filling the air with burning light. The attendants scattered, their careful formation dissolving into chaos. Marcus saw the shooter before anyone else did. A figure rising from behind a broken pillar, weapon aimed directly at the princess. Time seemed to slow down. Marcus could see the weapon charging. He could see Calithvera standing frozen, her guards too far away to help. He did not think. Thinking would have taken too long. Marcus threw himself in front of the princess. Just as the weapon fired, the blast hit him in the shoulder and spun him around. Pain exploded through his body, worse than anything he had ever felt. He hit the ground hard and saw stars, and had nothing to do with the princess's eyes. Above him, the guards had reached the shooter. The fighting ended as quickly as it had begun. Someone was calling for medical assistance. Someone else was shouting orders. The princess knelt beside him. For the first time, her face showed something that looked like emotion. Her 4 eyes were wide. Her hands hovered over his wound like she wanted to touch him but did not know how. Why? She demanded. "Why did you do that?" Marcus tried to laugh, but it came out as a cough. Seemed like a good idea at the time. That is not an answer. You could have died. The logical action was to seek cover. My guards would have handled the threat. You gain nothing by putting yourself in danger. I gain nothing, Marcus agreed. Blood was soaking through his uniform. The pain was making it hard to think. But I couldn't just watch. I couldn't let you get hurt when I could do something about it. But why? We have known each other for 2 weeks. I am not your family. I am not even your species. Why would you risk your life for me? Marcus looked up at her. Even now, with his shoulder torn open and his vision starting to blur, he thought she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. Because I couldn't live with myself if I didn't try, he said. Because some things matter more than being logical. Because he swallowed hard. Because I meant what I said. When I first saw you, I meant it. The princess stared at him. Something changed in her eyes. Something that her attendants, watching from nearby, had never seen before in any Valorian. You are the strangest creature I have ever met, she whispered. I get that a lot. Medical officers arrived and took over. They lifted Marcus onto a stretcher and rushed him toward the healing chambers. The princess walked beside him the entire way, ignoring her guards' protests about safety protocols. That night, after the doctors had sealed his wound and declared him stable, the princess came to visit him alone. She sat beside his bed for hours, asking him questions about human emotions. What was fear? What was joy? What was this strange feeling she had experienced when she saw him fall? Marcus answered as best he could. He told her about love and grief and hope and all the messy, illogical things that made humans who they were. When the sun rose over the crystal palace, the princess finally stood to leave. At the door, she paused. I think I am beginning to understand, she said softly. Why your species has spread so far so fast. Why you accomplish things that should be impossible. She looked back at him with all 4 of her impossible eyes. You are not limited by logic. You act on feeling. And feelings, I am learning, can be very powerful things. She left before Marcus could respond. But as he lay there in the healing chamber, watching the alien sun rise through the crystal walls, Marcus realized something important. The princess had not called his emotions primitive. She had not called them a weakness. She had called them powerful. And she had stayed with him all night to learn more about them. Maybe his stupid mouth had not ruined everything after all. The High Commander arrived 3 days after the attack. His name was Varadkal, and he was everything Marcus was not. He stood nearly 8 feet tall, the largest Valorian Marcus had ever seen. His skin was deep indigo, dark as a bruise, and his 4 eyes burned with cold intelligence. He moved through the palace like he owned it, because in many ways, he did. His family controlled the largest military fleet in the Empire. His genetic profile was considered perfect by Valorian standards. He had been chosen by the compatibility algorithms to marry Princess Kalithvera and unite the two most powerful bloodlines in the galaxy. The wedding had been scheduled for months. It was logical. It was efficient. It would produce offspring with optimal genetic advantages. And the princess, Marcus noticed, looked at her future husband like he was a stranger she had been forced to invite into her home. Vorathko noticed Marcus immediately. How could he not? The human was always near the princess now. She requested his presence for meals, for walks, for conversations that lasted long into the night. The guards whispered about it. The attendants exchanged worried chemical signals. The entire palace knew that something strange was happening between the princess and the small, soft, emotional creature from Earth. The High Commander cornered Marcus in a corridor on his second day at the palace. His guards blocked both exits. There was nowhere to run. So, Vorathko said. His voice was deep and cold, like stones grinding together at the bottom of an ocean. You are the human who speaks without thinking. Marcus stood as straight as he could. The top of his head barely reached the High Commander's chest. I've been working on that, actually. Have you? Then let me help you work harder. Vorathko leaned down until his face was inches from Marcus's. The princess is mine. The algorithms have spoken. The bloodlines have been analyzed. Everything has been decided by logic and reason, as all things should be. I understand. Do you? I wonder. The High Commander's eyes narrowed. You look at her with your primitive animal hunger. You think your feelings give you some claim to her. They do not. She is not a prize to be won through emotion. She is the culmination of 10,000 years of genetic planning. Marcus wanted to step back. Every survival instinct he had screamed at him to apologize, to bow, to make himself small and harmless. But somewhere in his chest, a different feeling was growing. Something hot and stubborn that refused to back down. What about what she wants? Marcus asked quietly. Vorathko laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. What she wants? She is Valorian. She does not want. She calculates. She analyzes. She chooses the optimal path. He straightened up and looked down at Marcus with contempt. You are a chemical reaction, human. A temporary malfunction in her neural patterns. She studies you because you are strange. When she grows bored, she will discard you like the interesting insect you are. The guards escorted Marcus away after that. He spent the rest of the day in his quarters, trying not to think about what the High Commander had said. The problem was, some of it made sense. Kalithvera was Valorian. She had been raised to believe that emotions were weaknesses. Everything she had shown him, every moment of curiosity and fascination, could just be scientific interest. He might be nothing more than a research project to her. But then he remembered how she had stayed with him all night after the attack. He remembered the look in her eyes when he fell. He remembered the way her voice softened when she asked him about love. Those were not the actions of a scientist studying an insect. The formal dinner that night was supposed to celebrate Vorathkel's arrival. The great hall was filled with Valorian nobles, all of them tall and perfect and cold. Marcus stood at the edge of the room, trying to be invisible, which was difficult when you were the only human present. The princess sat at the head table beside her future husband. She was dressed in robes that flowed like starlight, and she had never looked more beautiful or more distant. She did not look at Marcus. Not once. Vorathkel noticed. He smiled. I have been thinking, the High Commander announced, his voice carrying across the silent hall. About our human visitors. About the strange creature who follows our princess like a lost pet. The nobles turned to look at Marcus. He felt their eyes on him like physical weight. They are ruled by their emotions, these humans, Vorathkel continued. They call it strength. They call it passion. But we know the truth, do we not? We know that feelings are chains. Animals are ruled by instinct. Intelligent beings are ruled by logic. He raised his glass in Marcus's direction. To the humans, may they one day evolve beyond their chemical impulses. Laughter rippled through the hall. Cold, polite, controlled laughter. The kind that cut worse than any blade. Marcus felt something break inside him. Not his spirit. Something else. Something that had been holding him back. "You're right," he said. The laughter stopped. Everyone stared at him. No one spoke to a high commander without being addressed first. It simply was not done. Marcus walked forward into the center of the hall. His heart was pounding so hard, he could hear it in his ears. His hands were shaking, but his voice was steady. "You're absolutely right," he repeated. "Humans are ruled by emotions. Fear, love, anger, joy. We feel everything, all the time, and we can't turn it off." Vorathkel's smile widened. The creature admits its weakness. How refreshing. But here's the thing about feelings. Marcus looked around the room at all the perfect, emotionless faces. Fear makes us brave, because we act even when we're terrified. Love makes us strong, because we fight for people we care about, even when we have no chance of winning. Anger makes us persistent, because we refuse to accept things that are wrong. He turned to face Vorathkel directly. "You call it weakness. I call it the reason humanity crawled out of caves, split the atom, and crossed the stars in 300 years. Your superior species took 12,000 years to do the same thing. Maybe logic isn't as powerful as you think." The silence that followed was absolute. No one moved. No one breathed. Vorathkel's smile disappeared. His eyes went hard and cold. "You dare speak to me this way? You are nothing. An insect. A temporary amusement. Maybe. But I'm an insect who knows something you don't." Marcus took a deep breath. "I invoke the Kalthuras." A gasp went through the hall. Even the princess's eyes went wide. The Kalthuras was an ancient Valorian rite. A trial of worthiness that had not been used in centuries. It allowed any person to challenge another for anything they claimed, whether that was property, position, or partnership. "Impossible," Vorathkel snarled. "You do not have the right." "The right is open to anyone," a new voice said. The Emperor himself had spoken from his throne at the far end of the hall. He was ancient, his skin faded to pale gray, but his 4 eyes were sharp. "Even a human. If he invokes it, you must answer." The High Commander's fists clenched at his sides. "Then I answer. Name your challenge, insect. Combat? Strategy? Genetic analysis? I will defeat you in any arena." Marcus smiled. It was not a nice smile. "The challenge is mine to choose. Those are the rules. Then choose." "I choose a contest of passion." Marcus let the words hang in the air. "Each of us has 1 week to prove why we are worthy of the princess. Not through bloodlines. Not through military power. Not through algorithms. Through action. Through sacrifice. Through heart." The hall erupted into chaos. Nobles shouted. Guards moved forward. The High Commander looked like he wanted to tear Marcus apart with his bare hands. But the Emperor raised one ancient hand, and everyone fell silent. "The challenge is made. The challenge is accepted. The terms are set." His 4 eyes moved to Marcus with something that might have been curiosity. "In 1 week, I will judge which of you has proven himself more worthy." Marcus turned to look at the princess for the first time since he had entered the hall. She was staring at him with an expression he could not read. Her 4 eyes held depths he could not fathom, but she did not look away. And that, Marcus decided, was enough for now. He had 1 week to prove that humanity's greatest strength was not technology or warfare. It was the capacity to love irrationally, fiercely and completely. 1 week to win the heart of a princess who had been taught that hearts did not matter. 1 week to change everything. Marcus had never been good at keeping his thoughts to himself. Now, it was time to show everyone exactly what those thoughts could accomplish. The first day of the challenge, Varathkal presented a holographic display of his genetic history. It stretched back 10,000 years, showing every perfect ancestor, every optimal breeding decision, every carefully calculated improvement to his bloodline. The presentation lasted 3 hours. It was thorough. It was impressive. It was completely boring. When it was Marcus's turn, he stood before the princes and said one word in the Valorian language. The word for beautiful. He had spent all night learning how to pronounce it. His human throat was not built for Valorian speech. The sound came out rough and imperfect. But he said it while looking directly into her 4 eyes, something Valorians never did because it was considered too intense, too intimate. The princess did not look away. Neither did Marcus. That was all he did on the first day. One word, one moment. But every Valorian in the room understood what it meant. He was not trying to prove his worth through logic. He was trying to connect through feeling. On the second day, Varathkal presented military victories. Battles won. Enemies crushed. Territory claimed. His voice was cold and proud as he described destruction on a scale that made Marcus feel sick. Marcus spent the second day asking the princess about her childhood. They walked through the crystal gardens while she told him things she had never told anyone. How she had always felt different from other Valorians. How she experienced moments of strange sensation that her people would call defective. How she sometimes looked at the stars and felt something she had no word for. Longing, Marcus said softly. The word you're looking for is longing. The princess was quiet for a long time after that. On the third day, Marcus discovered her secret. He had gotten lost in the palace, which was easy to do when the halls seemed to rearrange themselves when you were not looking. He wandered into a section he had never seen before and found a garden unlike any other on Valoria Prime. Flowers grew there. Real flowers, not crystal ones. They were small and delicate, their petals soft shades of pink and gold. They grew in soil, not in engineered growing medium. They required water and sunlight and care. They served no practical purpose at all. The princess was there, kneeling in the dirt, her royal robes stained with earth. She looked up when Marcus entered, and for a moment, she looked afraid. Like a child caught doing something forbidden. Please do not tell anyone, she whispered. Growing things for beauty alone is considered wasteful. If the council knew, Marcus knelt beside her in the dirt. He did not care about his clothes. He did not care about what the council might think. Show me how to help, he said. They spent hours in that hidden garden. Marcus learned that the princess had been growing these flowers since she was young. They were the one thing in her life that had nothing to do with logic or efficiency. They existed purely because they were beautiful, and that was enough. This is how humans live, Marcus told her as they worked side by side. We create things that have no purpose except to make us feel something. Art, music, gardens. We fill our lives with beauty because beauty feeds something inside us that logic cannot reach. The princess looked at the flowers she had grown. Her hands were covered in soil. Her robes were ruined. And something in her expression was softer than Marcus had ever seen it. I think, she said quietly, that I have been living like a human my whole life without knowing it. On the fifth day, Marcus sang to her. He could not sing well. His voice cracked on the high notes, and he forgot some of the words. But he stood in the hidden garden surrounded by flowers and sang an old earth love song that his mother had sung to him when he was a child. The princess had never heard music before. Not like this. Valorians had sound, but it was all functional. Communication, information transfer. The idea of arranging sounds purely to create emotional response was foreign to them. She listened with all four eyes closed. When the song ended, Marcus saw something glittering on her cheeks. Tears. The princess was crying. She did not know what they were. She touched her face in confusion, looked at the wetness on her fingers, and then looked at Marcus with something close to panic. What is happening to me? Am I malfunctioning? Marcus sat beside her and took her hand. It was the first time they had touched. Her skin was cool and smooth, and she trembled slightly at the contact. You're not malfunctioning, he said gently. You're feeling. This is what it's like. It's overwhelming at first, but it's also wonderful. It means you're alive. It means something matters to you so much that your body can't contain it. The princess looked at him with those impossible eyes full of tears and starlight. I do not understand how humans survive this. Feeling everything so strongly. How do you bear it? We don't always bear it well, Marcus admitted. Sometimes it breaks us. Sometimes we make terrible decisions because our feelings are too big for our minds. But we wouldn't give it up. Not for anything. Because feeling is what makes life worth living. On the sixth day, everything changed. Marcus was walking through the palace when 3 guards appeared and seized him. They were not the princess's guards. They belonged to VORATH, single quotes, KEL. They dragged him to a chamber deep in the palace. The High Commander was waiting there, and his eyes burned with hatred. You have made me look foolish, Varathkal said. His voice was ice. You have turned this contest into a mockery. The princess looks at you now instead of me. She asked about your singing. She asked about your primitive emotional displays. Sounds like I'm winning. The first blow knocked Marcus to the ground. Pain exploded through his jaw. He tasted blood. You cannot win, Varathkal snarled. You are nothing. I will not allow an animal to take what is mine. He raised his hand to strike again. But before he could, the door burst open. Princess Kalithvara stood in the doorway. Her 4 eyes were blazing with something Marcus had never seen in any Valorian face. Something hot and fierce and utterly alive. Rage. The princess was experiencing rage. Remove your hands from him, she commanded. Her voice shook with emotion she could no longer control. Kalithvara, you do not understand, Varathkal began. I understand perfectly. She walked forward, and the guards stepped back from her without thinking. There was something dangerous in her eyes now. Something that had been sleeping for years and had finally awakened. You would harm him because you fear him. You fear what he represents. You fear that everything our species has believed for 3,000 years might be wrong. She stepped between Marcus and the High Commander, her body shielding his. I was raised to believe emotions were weaknesses, she said. I was taught that feeling was a defect. But watching this human, I have learned the truth. We did not evolve beyond emotion. We amputated it. We cut away the most vital part of ourselves and called it progress. She turned to look down at Marcus. Her eyes were still wet with the tears she was only beginning to understand. He taught me what it means to feel. He showed me beauty. He gave me music. Her voice broke slightly. He made me understand why I have always felt incomplete. She turned back to Varathkal. I will not marry you. I do not care what the algorithms say. I do not care what the council wants. For the first time in my life, I am going to make a choice based on what I feel instead of what I am told to calculate. The High Commander's face twisted with fury. The Emperor will never allow this. You are defective, corrupted. This human has infected you with his primitive disease. Then let the Emperor judge, the princess said calmly. Tomorrow, at the end of the challenge. Let him look at what your logic has produced and what Marcus's feeling has awakened. Let him decide which one is truly superior. She helped Marcus to his feet. Her hand in his was no longer trembling. It was strong and certain. "Come," she said softly. "We have one more day. I want to spend it in the garden." They walked out together, leaving Vorethgol standing alone in the chamber with his guards and his rage and his perfect genetic profile that suddenly meant nothing at all. Behind them, the princess's attendants whispered to each other in chemical signals that carried one clear message. Everything had changed, and there was no going back. The Throne of Eternity was the oldest structure on Valoria Prime. It had stood for 15,000 years, watching over the rise of an empire that stretched across 1,000 star systems. The walls were carved from stone that predated the Valorian species itself. The ceiling was open to the sky, letting in the light of 3 suns. Marcus stood in the center of the throne room and tried not to think about how small he was. The chamber was filled with Valorian nobles, military commanders, and genetic council members. Every important person in the empire had come to witness the judgment. They looked at Marcus with eyes that ranged from curiosity to disgust to something that might have been hope. Princess Calithvera stood nearby, her hands folded in front of her. She had not spoken since they entered, but her eyes found Marcus often. Each glance gave him strength he did not know he had. Vorethgol stood on the opposite side of the chamber. His perfect face was a mask of controlled fury. He had presented his final arguments that morning. Genetic analyses, military projections, political advantages. Everything logical, everything calculated, everything cold. Now it was Marcus's turn. The Emperor watched from his ancient throne. He was the oldest Valorian alive, nearly 3,000 years old. He had been present when the genetic programs began. He had voted to suppress emotion in his species. He had watched his people become cold and efficient and powerful, and he had spent 3,000 years wondering if they had made a terrible mistake. "Marcus, Chun of Earth," the Emperor said. His voice was soft but carried to every corner of the chamber. "You have invoked the Kaltheras. You have competed against the High Commander for the hand of my granddaughter. Now you must speak your final words before I render judgment." Marcus took a deep breath. His hands were shaking. His heart was pounding. Every eye in the room was fixed on him. This was the moment that would decide everything. Not just his future with Calithvera, but the future of 2 species who had come together across the vast darkness of space. "I am not going to argue that I deserve the princess," Marcus began. His voice echoed in the ancient chamber. "I am just a human. I am small and weak and emotional. I cannot compete with Valorian genetics. I cannot offer military alliances or political advantages. I have nothing to give except what I feel." He looked around the room at all the perfect, emotionless faces. The High Commander called humans primitive. He said we are ruled by chemical impulses. He's right. We are. We feel fear, and it makes us want to run. We feel anger, and it makes us want to fight. We feel love, and it makes us do things that no logical being would ever do. His voice grew stronger. "My grandfather died when I was young. I barely knew him, but I remember my mother crying at his funeral. I remember wondering why she was in so much pain over someone she would never see again. It seemed pointless, inefficient. What good does grief do?" He paused, but then she told me something I have never forgotten. She said the pain was worth it. Every tear, every sleepless night, every moment of missing him. It was worth it because the love had been real. The grief was proof that she had loved him, and she would not trade that love for all the peace in the universe. The chamber was silent. Not the cold silence of disapproval, but the heavy silence of people who were hearing something that touched places they had forgotten existed. Humans have done terrible things because of our emotions, Marcus continued. We have fought wars over pride. We have destroyed lives over jealousy. We have made countless mistakes because our feelings were bigger than our wisdom. He looked directly at the Emperor. But we have also created art that makes people cry with its beauty. We have written music that can heal broken hearts. We have built societies based on love for strangers we will never meet. We have crossed the stars not because it was logical, but because we looked up at the night sky and felt wonder. He turned to face Calethvera. Her 4 eyes were bright with tears she no longer tried to hide. Your Highness asked me once how humans survive feeling everything so strongly. The truth is, sometimes we don't. Sometimes it breaks us. But we keep feeling anyway, because the alternative is worse. A life without emotion is not really living. It is just existing. And existing is not enough. He walked toward her, ignoring the guards who shifted nervously. I love you, he said simply. I cannot explain it logically. I cannot justify it genetically. I just know that when I look at you, I feel like everything makes sense. When you smile, even the small smile you are learning to make, it feels like the sun coming up. When you cry, I want to hold you until the tears stop. When you are happy, I am happy. When you are hurt, I am hurt. He took her hand. The touch was gentle, but it carried the weight of everything he had said. That is what emotion is. That is what your species gave up 3,000 years ago. And I have spent this week trying to give it back. The silence stretched on. No one moved. No one spoke. Then the Emperor stood. In 3,000 years, he had never risen from his throne during a judgment. The chamber gasped. He walked slowly down the steps toward Marcus and Calethvera. His ancient eyes were fixed on their joined hands, on the tears on his granddaughter's face, on the small human who had challenged an empire with nothing but his heart. I remember, the Emperor said softly. His voice was different now, warmer. I remember what we lost. He reached out and touched Calethvera's face. It was a gesture of affection that had been erased from Valorian culture for millennia. She made a small sound of surprise. Her tears fell faster. We told ourselves that emotion was weakness, the Emperor continued. We engineered it out of our children. We became logical and cold and efficient. And we have been hollow ever since. He turned to face Vorathkal. You have presented an excellent case, High Commander. Your genetics are perfect. Your military record is impressive. Your political value is undeniable. Vorathkal straightened with satisfaction. But you have not felt anything in your entire life, the Emperor said. You do not know what it means to love. You cannot understand what you are asking my granddaughter to give up, because you have never had it yourself. The satisfaction drained from Vorathkal's face. The Emperor turned back to Marcus. And you are small. You are weak. You will live barely a century, while my granddaughter will live for thousands of years. There is no logic in choosing you. Marcus's heart sank. But logic, the Emperor said slowly, is not everything. He looked at his granddaughter with eyes that held something that had not been there before. Something that looked almost like love. I have watched Calethvera her entire life. I have seen her try to fit into a world that did not understand her. I have seen her hide her differences, her sensitivity, her capacity for feeling. And I have done nothing to help her. His voice cracked slightly. Today, I saw her defend this human with fire in her eyes. I saw her choose feeling over logic. I saw her become more alive than any Valorian I have seen in 3,000 years. He raised his voice so the entire chamber could hear. The judgment is made. The betrothal to High Commander Vorathkal is dissolved. Princess Calethvera will choose her own path. Vorathkal shouted in protest. The council members erupted in argument. But the Emperor raised his hand, and silence fell. Furthermore, he continued, I decree that the emotional suppression protocols will be studied. Any Valorian who wishes to explore the recovery of their emotional capacity will be supported, not punished. We've spent 3 millennia cutting away pieces of ourselves. Perhaps it is time to see if they can grow back. He looked at Marcus one last time. You came here carrying bags for diplomats. You leave having changed the course of an empire. A small smile touched his ancient face. Perhaps there is something to these human emotions after all. The wedding took place 1 month later. It was the most attended event in galactic history. Humans and Valorians stood together in the Crystal Gardens as Marcus and Calithvera exchanged vows. The flowers she had secretly grown for years bloomed around them in colors that had never been seen on Valoria Prime. YUK. Tanaka stood in the front row, crying happy tears. Ambassador Harrison looked like he still could not believe what had happened. The Emperor watched with eyes that grew warmer each day as he slowly, carefully, began to remember what it meant to feel. When the ceremony ended, Marcus leaned close to his bride and whispered in her ear, I want to marry her. Calithvera laughed. It was a sound she was still learning to make, rough and imperfect and absolutely beautiful. I know, she whispered back. I've always known. She kissed him then, in front of 2 species and 1,000 watching stars. It was not efficient. It was not logical. It served no practical purpose at all. It was perfect. And across the galaxy, on 1,000 worlds, beings of all species watched the broadcast and felt something stir in their hearts. Something old. Something long forgotten. Something that humans had never lost and would never give up. No matter how far they traveled among the Giste, stars. The capacity to love, irrationally, fiercely, completely. That was humanity's greatest gift, and they had finally found someone worthy to share it with.